Seitz and turn it over to her.
Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to congratulate you and your wonderful directors for getting all of you here at 9 a.m. This is amazing. And for those who are on stage to be able to play at 9 a.m. As a musician, I know it's really hard to play that early. So, first of all, I'm really excited to hear you guys. And some of you are my students right now, so I'm very proud. I also see other violinists who are not, but I've seen you, some of you at the auditions, which you did really great. And of course, I don't know anything about guitar or trumpet playing, so I'm just going to enjoy everyone's performance. Oh, there's another one. Hi, Priscilla, Louise. Oh my goodness. Joel, all my students, so half of this is my students. I'm very proud, so just saying. Well, if they play badly, forget that. But anyway, I know they're going to do great. So what we're going to do, I'm really excited to work with the violinists because that's sort of my expertise. And I'm going to have them play one of the pieces that were I think it's called Las Tres Fostecas, right? I hope I said it right. But, so they're going to perform for us. We're going to enjoy it. Feel free clapping if you like it at the end. And then after that, I think I'm going to ask the guitars, the guitarron, and I think it's viola, right? And then the trumpets and the harpist. You can either stay or leave the stage because obviously we're going to talk about violin techniques. And some musical things might apply to everyone, but specifically violin things, of course, I don't want you to be stuck on stage. I want you to just relax. So whatever you feel comfortable, everybody but violins. Violins, you're not going to feel comfortable, okay? You're going to work, no, I do. Okay, but we're going to have fun and work with violins, and everyone else on stage, feel free, just relax and do whatever you want, as long as you don't make noise. Okay, so here we are. Let's listen. job. Thank you guys. Great job. So you guys who are not violinists, you can relax and maybe go down, sit down, or whatever. Violinists, I want to congratulate you. You know, this is very exciting for me because even though I was brought up as a classical violinist, but I lived in what used to be Soviet Union, so yes, I'm very old. Some of you probably don't know what that is. But it used to have 15 different republics. So I grew up in Azerbaijan, which has kind of Middle Eastern culture. And so for me, even being trained classically, classical musical training was very traditional there. But right alongside of that, there was also and still is, very rich heritage, national heritage, Azerbaijani music, even though I'm not genetically Azerbaijani, I'm a different ethnicity, but similar. And so this kind of music, it was very normal for me growing up, having this wonderful classical training since I was 7 years old, very traditional, with great teachers, but also being exposed constantly to traditional music of my people or the country I lived in. So what I like about you guys, I think that enriches the experience of classical training, definitely. And one of the things that I really do like from what I'm seeing, I'm not an expert on mariachi music, I want to tell you. I can fake it, because I don't know if any of you were here, but I did play with solo with mariachi once. Here, many years ago, there was a tango that we played together. So I can kind of mimic certain styles, but I definitely don't know the style. However, this particular style of playing is rooted, first of all, it's performed on the classical instrument of violin, so obviously there will be a lot of common tactics, right? And then also, unlike some, for example, if you talk about jazz violin, I love jazz violinists. One of the oldest ones, Stefan Grappelli, is one of my favorites. If you don't know who he is, YouTube him. He was Italian violinist and he played forever. He was just like, he started, I don't know, maybe 30s and he still played in 70s. So his jazz playing is amazing, and that is very different. The principles of jazz violin music is very different from classical. You can't really apply many classical techniques to that style. But when it comes to mariachi or a tango style, which I love because I was on tango tour last year and I absolutely loved playing it. So these are the styles that very well translate, the classical playing very well translates to these styles. And so that's why I feel that we can definitely work on some things and help you guys. Not that you need improvement, you definitely mastered this piece, you totally aced it, but that's why I want to ask you guys, what is it? Let's just say, to make it, because Bible playing is so huge, that's why I wanted to focus on the single piece, because so we can kind of narrow down. So let's just go over to this particular piece. Number one, you still have your mics on? So yeah, so good. So you can just answer. You don't have to raise your hands, we're not in high school, so you're in college now, yeah. So anyway, just what are some of the technical aspects? Let's go with left hand. We're going to divide it, left and right? So left and right are very different. So let's say, number one question. What do you think is harder here? Left hand technique or right hand, or are they pretty much equal? Speaking to your mics if you do. Okay. Are your mics on or not? Yes, yeah. So yeah, go ahead, someone. So Aaron, for example, I'll put you on the spot. You're my student, so. What do you think is, what for you personally, what do you find more challenging here, left or right?
Well, it's both technical, both aspects. Because of you have the left hand, which is playing a bunch of like 16th notes. And has different patterns, right? But they're basically arpeggiated when you think about it. And the right hand is technical too because there's a lot of string crossing and there's a lot of big jumps. So you have to be really cautious about, where you're going or. So I think in this song, both hard and have their pros and cons.
Okay, I love that answer. So, personally, so I love how you named everything. You're right, that's what I was thinking. As far as the left hand, there are some very fast passages, and you're right, intonation is very important. When we talk about arpeggios, you mentioned that. Anybody can tell me why is it that arpeggios, we just, on the violin, they tend to be technically difficult? What is it that makes them particularly tricky for violinists versus for pianists, for example? Yeah, go ahead.
They don't always follow the same pattern. The piano always has, like the set patterns between the black and white. But the violin, it tends to change unless if you're shifting one three, then if you stay on one position, the fingers will alternate. And not to mention the string quartets as well. Piano, so they have the shifts, but it's more magical.
Great. And one thing that pianists don't have to deal with that we do? Yes. You see, sorry if I'm yelling. I get excited when I teach, they know that. And also I talk a lot about food, so if you're hungry, please remind me not to talk about food. Anyway. So, yes, so this is as far as the left hand for a violinist, not only you have to move fast, you have to be precise. And when you play a lot of arpeggios, you basically repeat the same 3 notes over and over again in different octaves, different positions, right? And so that definitely does require a lot of work. And so that's why I want to congratulate you guys, because your playing was very clean, both intonationally and also string crossings that you did. That was good. But I really liked what you did. I really liked that your bow distribution was very effective. Sometimes I have to say I do get scared when I see some mariachi players on the violin when they use very large amount of bow, regardless of whether they're playing in a very fast or in a slow tempo when they play separate notes. And so this is, I like that. I was going to work on this, but you guys do it very well. When you're playing very fast 16th notes, you're using less bow. So the reason this is important because when you repeat these movements so many times an hour and so many times a day, you can imagine it's probably like up in the millions. So the wear and tear on your bow arm is tremendous. In fact, sometimes some of my mariachi students, they come with their bows, like their hair is all like this. Have you seen that? So, and that's what my biggest goal with my students who play mariachi is to help them to figure out the bow arm. Because technically, if they were to use large bows on every one of those passages, that separate bow passages, I tell them your insides of your arm will probably look just like your bow hair after wear and tear, because it's just really, really very taxing. So that's what I was going to point out, and you guys really did very well. So let's see, intonation-wise, why don't you pick, who wants to pick a spot to work on? I know there was a little solo and violin part where you had on those string crossings. Can we go there? Why don't you decide where you want to start? Guys stay together, but it was a good test because you didn't have background rhythm, but you still did. And actually for string players, that's very hard, I have to say, right? For anyone who plays strictly classical music in the orchestra, if anybody is always rushing, it's the strings, right? We always tend to be rushing, we don't like our rhythms, so very good job. So I would like to go the first part and play. At that time, can we start there? Ready? Go. When you get to the A, F sharp A, the longer notes, do you plan to separate them? Or are you planning to connect them? What's the right style? Yeah, so of course we're playing a little bit slower, but I've noticed when you were playing in tempo, you automatically do the right articulation. However, it's important to practice with the right articulation in the slow tempo. So can we do it again? The same little snippet, and can we make sure you, obviously in the slower tempo, you will use more bow, which you did, that's great. But as you're using more bow, maybe because we're in slower tempo, can you make sure and still keep the detached notes detached and make sure to do it together, right? So still communicate with each other, especially since you know this, most of you know this by heart, right? So let's do it one more time. Yeah, good. Now, can we do this slurred? So the reason I want to do it slurred because I want you to really, as you're making your string crossings, I want you to approach the strings so they come out very smooth. Can we try that? So we're going to do a slur down, and then separate like you did before. Try that. Ready? Go. Yeah, so this happens to me all the time, but this is what I hear sometimes. So as you're leaving the F sharp and letting go of it, sometimes your bow is still catching the D. So on the slur, it's very easy to notice and very easy to remedy. In the slow tempo, it's better, but in the fast tempo, that was one of the things that, and of course, I'm being very picky because this is not a big deal, but in some other places it could be. So let's do it again, and can you make sure, a lot of that has to do with coordination, your left and right. I don't know if you guys can see me. So when your second finger is playing F sharp, and then next note is open A, you want to make sure and wait to let go of your second finger and not to let go of the second finger before your bow is completely cleared of D string and is on A string, right? It makes sense to violinists, right? Who are here. And so what happens if that coordination is messed up, then sometimes you catch strings and you hear notes that are not supposed to be there, right? So that's what I want you to concentrate on, right? Really watch your bow, and by watching your bow, what I mean is what I was pointing out is where the hair actually crosses the strings with the string, and it actually makes a cross. Can you imagine that, guys? I know you don't have many strings, but you do, guys, right? Put your bows on the strings. Do you see? All you can see I can't do this around my here. So that's right. So here it is. You see that cross? This is where the sound happens. So a lot of times when I teach someone, if they're not my students, and I ask them, what's your bow? They don't know what to do. That's what you watch, because that intersection of hair and string is where the sound actually happens, right? So when we're going to do this, guys, that's what I'm asking. When I'm asking you to watch your bow, I want you to watch the exact moment when your bow has left the D and is already started playing on A, and only after that, you leave the second finger, right? You lift the second finger off the D string. That way, we avoid having that extra note there, which is open D, that's not really in the music, right? Right. 1, 2. Let's do it again. So bows on the string, everybody. That was very good. Again, by the way, that was great because I didn't hear the D string. So let's do it one more time. 1, 2. And the next passage, just like that. Yeah. Ready? Go. Next. Keep just going. That's it. Okay. Okay, they weren't out of tune. They just played two different passages. That's good. So I'm confusing you totally. is going
It's in the photo, so it's a new one.
I have a slightly different part of the score, so I'm just gonna go with my ear, and I'm gonna do video parts after. Okay, so let's do the whole solo right now. So one more thing, can we all tune the F sharps? So they're all tuned to the same F sharp? Then A, D. I think the D could be better. Then F sharp. Okay, good job. Now I'm gonna cross tune that arpeggio. What are the, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're playing 7 notes, but how many different pitches? There are only 3 pitches, right? It's F sharp, A, and D. So that's the tricky part about playing arpeggio. So now we're going to cross tune it. We want to make sure that the first F and all the other Fs from way after that are exactly the same. Then the D and actually the D will only play once, but F sharps and A's are the ones that will repeat, right? So let's see. I'm going to hold that F sharp first, and you're going to play the whole thing. And make sure you go slower, and make sure every time you hit F sharp, it's still in tune with the one I'm holding, because that's the first one we play. Let's try that. Here's F sharp. Yeah, go. Tune it, tune it. Keep going, then next. Then F sharp again. And A. Very good. So you see, we tend on E string, sometimes we hear slightly different, right? Because E string is higher, it's also very thin. So I think what happens, for example, on D string is thicker and it's lower. So I think naturally our ear perceives differently the overtones of every note, because every pitch is comprised of different overtones. So I think depending on which string we're playing, each pitch is perceived just slightly, ever so slightly differently. So even though it all sounds in tune to us, but you know, on E string, the F sharp was a little bit different than the first one. So that's the whole point of this cross tuning. So now I'm going to hold my open A, and you guys are going to play the same thing, and let's see if all the A's are in tune. Of course, the first one is open, but then there's one more on the E string, right? F sharp. Next. 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 Then F sharp. And back to A. Yes. So yeah, especially the long ones. That was really good. So this is actually, this is the problem with our intonation. There's a very small margin error when you have so many people playing, you know, per part, and that's the difficult part about being a violinist, whether you're a soloist or in the chamber group or in a large ensemble especially, because violins are usually the most numerous section of the orchestra, or, for example, mariachi ensemble too, right? And so the problem is, I remember I read somewhere that when they measured the accuracy requirements for Olympic athletes versus classical musicians, we are way higher in the kind of accuracy that is expected from us than from an Olympian athlete, because our margins of error are so tiny. And so this is why, even the tiniest deviation from the actual pitch by one person, when you have several people playing exactly the same pitch, can still affect the sound. So this is why when you're tuning, it's very important to remember those two things. Obviously, if you play a note for the first time, you have to, it's good to use maybe drones, open strings, or something like that. Make sure you use your ears when you're working intonation, because I know now we have all these gadgets where you can look and it just tells you, but that's obviously not what you're going to use when you're on stage, right? You're not going to whip up something and see if you're in tune and look at something when you're playing. What you want to cultivate when you practice your working intonation, you want to teach yourself to hear the sound that you're expecting and then compare your own sound that you're making to that sound that you know is true and see whether you're in tune. And then the second thing, of course, if you're out of tune, to know whether you have to go up or down, because when you're playing on stage and performing, your ears are the only guide you have. So for that reason, when you're, obviously, if you're in a situation where you can't really hear a tuner and you have to tune really quickly in a big room with lots of people, obviously it's okay to use these tuners that tell you visually. But anytime you practice, beginning with the very tuning, you want to turn on your ears. Because when you're tuning to a sound rather than to a visual, it tells your body, okay, the eyes are not my guide now, the ears are. Because if you think of how powerful eyes are, right? Our body follows our eyes all day long, right? And so for music, your ears should become your eyes. So even the simple act of tuning your instrument before you start practicing, tuning it by hearing the drone is much better in telling your body to start using your ears rather than relying on your eyes. So that's why when you work in intonation, anytime you're by yourself, you're not in a noisy room where you can't hear anything, which you shouldn't work in intonation in that case anyway. But make sure and use the guides that are for your ears, not for your eyes. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah? So yeah, I hope if you learn anything from this session, learn this. Really learn to use your ears when you play, not your eyes, as much as possible. So now, so the first, obviously, when you work in intonation, task is to find, when they're playing the F sharp, the first F sharp, right? They have to have, and they all have very good ears, and they have to imagine in their mind, not just where they're going to place their finger, but what it's going to sound like if they want to be to. But then the second time they get to play an F sharp, there's another thing they have to do. Now, and you too, or you else, you have to match yourself perfectly. So that's the second component that people forget. And that's what I was demonstrating here. That it's not just about nailing the note for the first time, but then when you play consecutively, you repeat those notes over and over again, like in this section, even if you're still within the zone of a right pitch, but if I hear a deviation every time you play that note, it sounds a little different. To me, it'll create this weird feeling, I don't know, this person seems to hit their notes on right, but there's something weird about their intonation. It just doesn't leave me with that really good feeling of clean accuracy. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes you hear a person think, I think their intonation is okay, but there's something weird about it. And that's what happens a lot. We forget to match our own intonations, right? And so this kind of cross-tuning where you don't just tune one F sharp, but you find that F sharp and then you tune every other F sharp to it, making sure that every time you play that F sharp or A or D, you're hitting it exactly the same. That is what is going to nail your intonation like to the very top. And you feel more comfortable and confident. Okay, so I wanted to move to that section at the end when you have those little, can we go from there? Let's do it in tempo first. If you want to start a little before, that's fine. Start a little, get into it, whatever's comfortable, because it's a tough one to start right on the spot. So, yeah, so we're gonna go slower, right? Maybe I'll turn on the Can you hear that, guys? So, why don't you look at the score and see exact measure that you guys going to start with? Just decide, because I know there's some repetitions and sometimes it's difficult to figure out. I love my iPad. It has everything, every gadget and every piece of music I need. Ready? So you want to count off? One more time without the unit. One more time, that's a good time. Okay, that's good. So, what I hear is that you're very together in that da 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 dum bum, but then once we're getting into the da da da, the broken thirds going down, it sounds messy. I think mostly because you're just slightly off, just every so slightly. Someone is maybe speeding up and someone is not, and so you end up kind of falling a little bit apart, not much, but and it's weird because it ends up sounding like there's something wrong with intonation, but to me I think it's more about the timing, that every bow is changed exactly at the same time, right? And so this is where the bows actually are a blessing, believe it or not, because you can see them, they're very visual. So how about if we go even slower? And then, since all of you guys know your music, right, can you really visually watch? So Aaron and Leah, since they're there will be our leaders. And so can you match their bow changes exactly with them? Not just the da 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 bum bum, but when you go da 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 da, can you resist the urge to go at your own pace that you're used to? And really synchronize your bows exactly, bow changes with them. Can we try that again? Did you hear the difference? That was so clean. That sounded so clean. And we didn't even do anything. Can we go a little bit faster? That was very, very good. It was very precise. I could hear every note. It just wasn't chaotic at all. And all you did, you were just watching the timing of your bows, right? So one thing also I have to tell you, this is weird, because the bow arm can be very annoying and difficult and make things much more difficult for your left hand. This is why, because in the passage that they just played, the bow arm has a pretty, I'm not saying it's easy to bow, no, but it's a simpler task, right? Just down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And in this case, you don't even have string crossings there, right? It's all E string, most of it, right? The highest part. So once the bow settles into this rhythm, it loves to just be super in charge, like a conductor. It just wants to go down, up, down, up, down, and it's like, this is the tempo, and this is what I'm going. Like, it almost gets hypnotized into this pace. But the left hand very often has so many more little tasks that it needs to accomplish, like, for example, shifts, or different finger patterns that has to be adapted from position to position, from note to note. And so in this, what happens as your bow gets locked into that kind of pace that it likes, and very often the up bow is going to be slightly shorter than the down bow, which makes that They speed up. Not only locks in, it also goes faster and faster because every up bow is going to be shorter and shorter. So every next down bow starts a little bit sooner. You see that? So the problem with that for bow arm, it's no big deal because it only goes down, up, down, up. But then your left hand gets left behind, and then you end up doing blah, 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 sounding like this. I don't know, it happens to me all the time. And then maybe your teacher tells you, you have your left hand and bow arm needs to be better coordinated. And you're like, well, how do I do that? That sounds really complex. But literally, the best cure to that, and technically that's what I made them do by just telling them to watch the bows. But what they didn't realize they did by watching the bows, they made the bow arm go a little bit later, so the left hand had the time to prepare and hit the right notes. And so everything became synchronized. So for me, when I play, I don't know, maybe like Tchaikovsky Concerto, something like this, you know? If I'm having a hard time and I think it's the left hand, it's not. It's because my bow arm wants to go too fast because it has a much easier, not easier, it has a simpler task, right? So a place like this where your bow arm gets left in and it just wants to hypnotize you and it just wants to dictate and be your conductor, you have to stop. And it's different for everyone. For me, it's weird. For me, I've noticed if I think, usually what works best if I think bow after left, I make my bow follow my left hand in my mind. Some people like thinking left hand before the bow. It's whatever works, but you just have to, and we're not speaking musically. Of course, when we're talking musical phrasing, the bow is always the leader in musical sense. But when we talk about technique, especially fast passages, when you have lots of open, separate notes, détaché, right? One note per bow, and it goes very fast. So this is very important that you let the left hand lead, or you let your bow follow, whichever works better for you. But that will really save your life on stage. And have you ever been in this where you start playing and then all of a sudden you go faster and faster and faster, and you know you're going to crash, but you just cannot slow down your fingers for the life of you? Have you had that? Raise your hand if you have that experience. I have it all the time. So you know the trick? It's not the left hand that you need to slow down, it's your bow arm. If you switch your thinking into thinking the bow has to follow, left hand leads, bow follows. That's the only way you get out of this catch-22. But it took me, believe me, it took me way too long to figure it out. So here, I'm giving you this, and I hope you take it because you will thank me later. I promise, if you practice like this. If you really practice places like this, letting your bow follow. Don't let your bow lead when it comes to fast passages. Okay, very good. So let's try that faster. And again, you guys are leaders. So when you practice by yourself, this is what you want to practice. You can use metronome for that, but remember, you are working in your rhythm in your bow. You're allowing your left hand to be a little bit ahead, so you don't want to allow your bow to lead rhythmically, so it starts speeding up. So at home it will be different, but right now we have a very easy way to do it. You just follow your leaders and make sure you don't speed up, right? You too, because then they're not going to be happy. So let's go a little bit faster. And remember when you get to go da-da-da, all you have to do is just watch your bow, right? Do not go ahead of them or behind. Just really synchronize your bows with them. I think we can do a little bit better. So that when you hit that G, or what was it? Yeah, C sharp. So when you hit that, make sure and everybody lock and don't hit it before they do or after they do. That's the most important note. If you hit that right and then follow the bows all together, it'll be even cleaner. One time. Giving a little on the beat. That was good. So you can practice like this. Now can we do that but without showing it? Like, so we don't give it away. That was good. Let's go a little bit faster. We have 10 minutes, and I'm going to let you guys pick something. But before I have to say this, I know I have to take it off my heart. I'm being selfish, but my dream in life was to be a singer. So when I see people who can play and sing, I feel very jealous in a good way. Very happy for you. I was born to a family of singers. My parents traveled with a rock band, and I was backstage, and I thought I was going to be a singer. I never got a singing voice. So I have a special admiration for people who can play and sing, and you guys sing beautifully. So now, up to you. What do you guys want to work on? It doesn't have to be for anything. We have 10 minutes. Any questions? Anything you want to work on? Oh, you guys in the audience, if you have any questions? Yeah, let's do that.
Do you have any tips for fast classes in your string crossing?
One more time?
Do you have any tips for when you have fast classes in your string crossing?
Fast passages with string crossings. Looking for tips.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mariette. So any tips for fast passages with string crossings? Yes. Number one, what we did practicing slurs is good. Second tip I do, so, by the way, is it okay if okay, I'm going to throw a shameless ad here. I do have a YouTube channel, it's called Seitz Pros. I have a lot of tutorials on there, fast flow. So you can find it there. But, so a couple of tips. Number one, practice it slurred. Especially if you're thinking of speeding up, if you want to bring the speed up, it's much easier to do it on slurs. So you separate your right from your left, right? So, and also as you're slurring, anticipate when the string crossing is and bring your bow closer to the string ahead of time. The next tip, it sounds really dumb. I know it looks very like for me, but I don't care. When the note that is going to be on the new string, I put a bow direction on it, so I pay attention to it. For example, like here. See that? So F sharp, I start on D string. A is my next note on the new string. So I would put an up bow there. Then F sharp would be new note on another note on the new string, and it's up bow. I put an up bow there. The reason I do that is for two reasons. Number one, our body gets so used to crossing strings, we do it automatically, and sometimes we're not aware where it is, and that could make a big difference. Second, direction of whether you're going to a higher string on the up bow or higher string on the down bow, and vice versa. If you're going on the highest string, lower string up bow, or a lower string down, it makes a huge difference. So it's like either going this way, or clockwise, or counterclockwise, and that makes a huge difference. So for me, that simple tip, when I practice, I just, especially now that we have iPads, we can do it. Sorry about that. It's my watch. We can do it in color, right? Because old-fashioned music, I was not allowed. You could only do a pencil because you wanted to erase it. So these two things, I think, will be very helpful. One more. That's a little bit more complex. So let me see if I can coordinate the mic with the plate. Actually, can I have someone to help, please? Can you come? Or whoever. Okay, Aaron, let's go. So I'm going to have Aaron show you so I can stay by me. Could you stand there a little bit? Okay. So Aaron Aaron is gonna help me illustrate. So Aaron, if you could turn this way so they can see, yeah. Now can you put the bow on the strings? So do you see where her bow, you can imagine, I know it's easier to see when you're closer, but, so if your bow is on D string, and then do you see how there's a little space until she hits the A string, right? Do you understand what I'm saying, guys? So that little part, our body doesn't realize it. So when we go from D to A, the body thinks it will start on the same place. And it starts adding extra movement like that. Does it make sense? So this is the biggest problem with string crossings for me, especially when you're not slurring and you're playing détaché, because let's go down and stop, like on D string, down. Yeah, stop, and then change to A string. Do you see, she actually started her up bow on A string in a different place than she ended on D. Let's try it again. So D down, yeah, and then drop, yes. If you can imagine, the beginning of the note up bow on A string is slightly lower, like about half an inch, which equals the distance between the strings, right? And then go up. Now let's stop and go to, drop to E string. On E string, go down. The beginning of the bow is a little bit lower too. Thank you, Aaron. That was great. This is such a good sport. Anyway. Yeah. So this is, I know this is a little bit more complex, but a lot of times the body doesn't realize it, and so it expects to make sound in a different part of the bow actually when you're crossing strings. And you can imagine, in a slow tempo, it doesn't really make a big difference, but when you're going really fast, remember that your instrument always needs a little bit of time to produce the sound. So if you're going fast and you miss that little spot and your body is still trying to catch up and actually thinking that it's starting the sound in a different part of the bow, you can imagine how you won't have enough time to make sound on that very short note. So one of the cures for that, I actually watch my bow like a hawk, and what I tell myself, imagine, so here, I'll try. So I look at, and remember what I told you, when I'm talking about watching the bow, I'm watching this very cross section of the hair and the strings. And so this is what, it's kind of a mental thing. But when you look at that, you don't just think, oh, this is where I'm going to play, like move my bow. You think, you tell yourself, this is where I expect the sound to be produced. And that makes a huge difference. That will give you that extra tenth of a second. So if you, when you're looking at where your bow is going to start the next note, and you're just thinking, oh, I'm just going to move the bow there, guess what? Your body will just start moving, and that will take another whatever, millisecond or whatever for the sound actually to start being produced, right? And it's, how do you can't really figure out how sooner you have to start to get the sound on time. That's crazy math. But if you just think that, if you just expect the sound, then guess what? Your body knows it and it will figure it out and it will actually do every prep earlier. It's some of the best things, best ways for me to get cleaner string crossings. So let's recap. So number one, you want to practice slurs, right? And really get that very smooth going from one string to another. Number two, whenever you play, have a note that's going to be on the new string, put a bow direction over that note. Number three, don't forget the gap between the strings. You're not going to start your next up bow or down bow if you're going to a new string in the same place. So be aware of that. And then when you're looking at that cross section of the hair and the string, expect the sound. Don't expect the movement, right? And then I think you should be good. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Diana. Awesome. Incredible information, detail, accuracy.
Please subscribe to our channel.
Seitz String Pros. It's an amazing YouTube channel.
And one more brag. my daughter Esther is, that's why we call Seitz Spring Force, because my daughter Esther is a cellist with Minnesota Symphony. I'm very proud of her. She's a professional cellist, and so we run that channel together, and so there's also stuff for cellos and a little bit for violas. So yeah, appreciate if you make this live.